All right, when it comes to this province, Premier Tim Houston is thinking big. He is proposing a national energy corridor coast to coast called Wind West. He's floated the idea of building a massive offshore wind farm producing up to 66 gigawatts of power. Most of that power would be exported to the rest of Canada, potentially supplying 27% of Canada's electricity needs. The Premier says the Nova Scotia government is ready to invest, private capital is ready to invest, and are looking to the federal government to step up with funding. The Premier, of course, is also bold when it comes to the development of natural resources, including uranium exploration, despite pushback from some groups and citizens who claim not nearly enough consultation has been done while environmental and health concerns are being overlooked. So, the question that I'm asking you to weigh in on, or one of the questions that I'm asking you to weigh in on when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12 today, do you support the Premier's bullish approach to resource development and energy? Is it about time we take advantage of these opportunities? Is it time to finally think big here in Nova Scotia? Or do you think that it's reckless and short-sighted in a rush to solve our fiscal challenges, which are evident and obvious and well-detailed? That much we do know, folks, is that we are in a serious fiscal hole, and unless something big changes, we are doomed fiscally here in this province of Nova Scotia. Just a matter of time till we will no longer be able to provide services for all of us, like healthcare and road infrastructure and education, and the list goes on of services that the provincial government supports and provides for us Nova Scotians. So, is it time to think big and dig in and double down on resource development and energy projects like the one that the Premier is proposing? Or, again, is it reckless and short-sighted in a rush to solve our fiscal challenges? That is one of the questions that I'll ask you to weigh in on. And, of course, the same conversation is being held nationally. Prime Minister Mark Carney sat down with oil and gas executives in Calgary on Sunday to discuss partnerships and get their input for its plans to make Canada an energy superpower. Carney, in his first visit to Calgary since being sworn in as Prime Minister, held a closed-door roundtable with more than 24 members of the energy sector. That, in and of itself, is quite a statement, folks. Can you imagine Justin Trudeau sitting down with the energy executives? Not a chance. He wouldn't do that. And what are your thoughts on the fact that the Prime Minister is consulting with energy superpowers and tycoons? Is it about time that they at least started having these conversations and this dialogue, and will it go a long way in repairing Western alienation? Should Ottawa work with the oil and gas industry? Is oil and gas a critical resource to make Canada an energy superpower? And I think that it's pretty evident that it is. The question is, are environmental concerns taking a backseat to our fiscal reality? And look, for decades now, the environmental movement has grown and grown and grown and grown in persuasion and popularity and sway over governments. Perhaps that pendulum is moving and switching back now, because the fiscal writing is on the wall as we look to diversify our economy. And we know that the United States is no longer a partner we can rely on, with Donald Trump being at the helm and his at-whim, unpredictable, volatile nature of leading. And look, that creates massive instability, and we can't absorb that as a country and as an economy. So should we be looking to our energy and oil and gas and pipelines in order to get ourselves out of this hole? And more energy development and resource development? Or, again, do you have serious, grave environmental concerns? These are some questions that I'm going to ask you to weigh in on. I have some other things as well in the pile that we'll get to, but anyway, these are just a couple of things that I wanted you to consider and weigh in on, as mentioned, when we open the phone lines in about an hour's time. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass at the control board. Is doing a fine job. As always, of course, the Stanley Cup Final kicks off tomorrow night in Edmonton. And why they pushed this back so far, I have no idea. I've said this before. I'll say it one more time, and I'll not say it again. The NHL season is way, 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 way too long. I mean, people are just not thinking about hockey right now, unless you're a diehard Oilers fan. People are just out of that hockey mode. I know I certainly am. I probably won't watch 1 second of the Stanley Cup Final, to be honest with you. I don't know why. It's just June, nice weather. Sorry, I'm out. If the Leafs were ever playing in June, then I would watch, but I'm not anticipating that's going to happen anytime soon. Probably never in my lifetime. Never has. So there you go, folks. All right. And kick off the show with Ross Jefferson, President and CEO of Discover Halifax, with some great news for the tourism industry here in the region. Ross Jefferson, welcome to the show, of course.
Todd, great to be with you.
All right. So when it comes to tourism, the numbers are great, according to your latest report from Discover Halifax. Tell us what some of the details are.
Yeah, well, we just concluded our annual report, our look back on 2024. Of course, we were again on one of the highest number of rooms sold for the entire year. We were up 2.6% over the previous year. And to compare back to pre-pandemic, we're about 11% higher in rooms sold. So things are really encouraging for the tourism industry here in Nova Scotia and in Halifax specifically.
Okay, what are some of the contributing factors, do you think?
Well, look, there's a number of things that have contributed last year. Last year, we had a really great roster of events starting right in January, from the Canadian World Juniors through the Junos later on in the year. And it was just a really active time for visitation across the country. Of course, when we look to this year, we're equally excited. One of the things I do like to share and we do like to talk about is, tourism is an export. And in these times right now, when the challenges that we have going on with our neighbor to the south, our exports are being affected. Well, the tourism industry is on the opposite side, and in fact, there's some positive reasons why we believe Canadians will be traveling more in Canada this year.
Yeah, for sure.
So just an interesting stat for you is that, Americans will spend $13 billion traveling to Canada every year, where Canadians will spend $26 billion traveling to the U.S. So we're quite encouraged by some of the stats that a lot of those Canadians will be deferring their travels to the U.S. and spending a lot more time here in Canada.
Okay, I'm reading the story off our website, and you're talking about an arrangement with HRM first year under your new service agreement. Tell us what this new service agreement, what's that all about with HRM?
Yeah. So last year we entered into a new agreement with HRM, and of course, Discover Halifax is a nonprofit agency. We're membership-based with about 850 members, but we've been providing specific services to the municipality for almost 30 years. Those services up until last year were marketing and sales services. So everything from running television ads and bidding on conferences and events, and really trying to sell the city. Last year, we added to that responsibility in our industry what's known as destination development. And really what that means is that we're not just here to sell. We're also going to be looking at what is the product, what is the visitor experience, and what can we do in our community to create a better foundation that improves our visitor economy, but also improves the overall state of the economy and the health of communities, quite frankly. So we've got an opportunity with this fastest growing industry in the world to not let it just dictate what's going to happen in our community, but we've got an opportunity to shape it. So what do I mean by shape? Well, look, we've got an opportunity to design things that make sense not only for visitors but also for residents. We've got an opportunity to attract events that obviously will bring economic opportunity from visitor spending, but also for Nova Scotians. And that is really the essence of destination development. Just in the one extra thing we did add into that service agreement is that we've also opened up a support office for events. that's putting a little bit more resources into going after those significant events for our community and to support those local events that we think can also grow.
Right, you mentioned the trepidation that some have heading south of the border. At least you alluded to it anyway. I would think that would create an opportunity for events for people that were planning on perhaps hosting events in the United States, inviting Canadians to move those events north of the border. And I would think that HRM would be well positioned for some of that. Are you getting some of that over, Spill?
Yeah, we absolutely do. We've got a couple of very real occurrences already. We expect a few more to be happening. So both in the business events world, so those are the conventions and big meetings, as well as sports events and other types of events. We do know that people are a little bit more or a little bit less inclined to travel to the U.S.
Yeah, some would, Ross, sorry to interrupt you, but some would say afraid to, and justifiably so.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's been a lot of stories that have been shared publicly, and when it comes to travel, people rightfully so, I think, are cautious. Yeah. So, that's translating into opportunities definitely for us here in Nova Scotia and here in Halifax.
All right. Last week I chatted with somebody from the Restaurant Association, and she said that the restaurants are suffering mightily. Not all, of course. There are exceptions, but about 50% are right on the margins and potentially closing. And we hear about stories like this all the time. I would assume that it's concerning for tourism in general, because these are key partners to the tourism industry. What are your thoughts on the restaurant industry and its viability, and what can be done to better support it, I suppose, besides going there?
Yeah, look, I know this year I think has been pretty hard for the patio season to get kicked off. Yeah. We've not had the best weather. I do know and understand that costs are a real challenge for the restaurant industry. Look, we're really hopeful that the visitor economy again can be a significant support. We do know when people travel, they tend to spend more money. They'll spend more money outside of their own communities on things like tours and exhibits, but they'll also spend more per check dining and entertainment. So if we can continue to have growth in the tourism industry, we're hopeful that we can at least be a little bit of a support in the cash registers of some of those members, including those restaurants.
All right. When it comes to tourism and the cruise industry, that we're expecting big numbers as well. Many of those coming from the United States. What can you tell us about the cruise numbers?
Yeah, again, I think we're expecting to see the slightly more passengers this year than last, and of course, last year was a big recovery year for many passengers coming back from the United States. We're encouraged by that visitation. We think it's going to continue to grow. We see all of our markets, quite frankly, really with a significant demand behind them. The business events market, the cruise market, the leisure travel market, and people visiting friends and relatives. All of those are really positive this year, and we continue to see that trend of people wanting to travel.
Are you anticipating any kind of anti-U.S. sentiment from people? Hopefully not, because I think people coming here are generally disconnected or from the politics of the United States, certainly of the White House. But were any concerns about the attitude towards Americans?
Yeah, we actually did some surveys here to understand how Nova Scotians and people here in Halifax would act, and would they have a different behavior to Americans. We're really pleased that was a very conclusive. The answer was no, that they wouldn't be. Now, there are obviously some exceptions. When we just asked about visitors coming in, and we asked specifically about U.S. visitors. Now, I think if someone's wearing a red mega hat on the waterfront, they may get a comment from somebody, but I think that's true anywhere in the world. I don't think that's unique here, and I don't even think that statement is false in the United States. So, but I think overall we're really confident that visitors are going to be treated well, and I think that I think we recognize that you can't judge an entire country by the policies of government administration, and not everyone in the U.S. believes and subscribes to those policies too.
Okay, Ross, sounds like you're going to have a great summer, and we'll talk again. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Ross Jefferson, President and CEO of Discover Halifax. There was talk about expanding sales, and when it comes to alcohol in Nova Scotia, to other store outlets and other retail outlets being produced, and there's some surveying went out. Not everybody's on board with this. We'll talk about this when we come back.
Facts.
Mulligan is the Senior Manager of Advocacy, Atlantic Canada, and Strategic Initiatives at the Canadian Cancer Society, and joins me for a chat. Heather, thanks for joining the show.
Good morning, Todd. Good to hear your voice.
All right, so your organization is concerned about the possibility of Nova Scotia expanding alcohol sales in here in the province, and you've sent a letter off to the province detailing why. What are some of your concerns?
Yeah, well, honestly, Todd, I'm actually astounded that we're even having this conversation about expanding alcohol access. This isn't about access. We already have more than enough. We've got over 300 locations across the province, including NSLCs, not including bars and restaurants. And this isn't about trade either. There's no requirement, any trade agreement or any MOU or any legislation that says Nova Scotia has to do this. No one is asking or forcing us to make this move. So really the real question is, why are we talking about making alcohol more available when we should be talking about how we could better support Nova Scotians, reduce the health and social costs that taxpayers are left recovering each and every year related to alcohol harm? That's the thought leadership that this province deserves, and really that's the conversation we should be having.
Okay, tell us about some of the empirical data which backs up what you're saying.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about the known health risks. Alcohol is a group 1 carcinogen. It's the same category as tobacco and asbestos. We know that 2 in 10 Canadians drink alcohol daily, which makes this a widespread health issue that needs urgent action. When it comes to the position of the Canadian Cancer Society, we know that drinking any type of alcohol and any alcohol amount increases the risks of at least 9 different types of cancer, including breast and colorectal. And only 40% of Canadians are aware that alcohol increases cancer risk. So this highlights the need for stronger public education, clear labeling, and helping more people make informed choices. We know that if we were to reduce alcohol intake, we could prevent approximately 44,000 cancer cases in Canada by 2042. And so what we're looking for is we should be having a conversation around how we're decreasing our risks, not how to increase it. That means health warning labels, education and awareness, training and support for our healthcare workers, but also, more importantly, those resources for community organizations that are dealing with intimate partner violence, addiction, mental health. You know, alcohol is deeply woven in our communities, and there's not enough support or public policies and guardrails to really help us navigate through this conversation.
Okay, and is there empirical data which will tell us that having more access will increase consumption?
Yeah, it is, and we're learning more coming out of the Ontario experience as well. And so what we already know is we have a lot of access, and I'll put it in other terms. A couple of years ago, a lot of us laughed about it, but we were the, per capita highest number of Tim Hortons. So 169 Tim Hortons locations across the province. That meant 1 Tim Hortons for every 6,000 Nova Scotians. We already have 300 liquor outlets in this province, meaning we have 1 alcohol distributor for every 3,000 Nova Scotians. And the costs of that are well known. Alcohol costs our taxpayers $652 million every year in both health and social harm. That's everything from healthcare costs, our ERs being, having folks in there, our health human resources dealing with injury associated with alcohol, but also other things like violence, lost productivity, justice system. And so actually, Nova Scotians every year are left at a deficit. We're recovering $219 million every year in a shortfall associated with alcohol based on just current access. And so, of course, as you open up the number of outlets and you make it more accessible, you're also increasing the risk for other people. And we're seeing great action being taken by other provinces as well, and so we need to follow their lead.
What are some of those other provinces?
Well, so when we think about just Atlantic Canada, for example, provinces are showing leadership. Newfoundland and Labrador in 2022 released an alcohol action plan that is taking a whole of government approach to reducing harm. That also includes reducing outlet density. We also know that New Brunswick, they just voted down a bill to look at expanding alcohol sales in convenience stores because of the health risks and the social harms. Prince Edward Island, they've been actively debating the links between alcohol and cancer and community harm in their legislature last year, and they consulted with islanders, not on expanding access, but actually how to better protect islanders and create a whole of government approach to better informing about the risk. So if Nova Scotia moves forward with this proposal, we're not only just undermining our own healthcare system and the work of organizations like the IWK, like the Nova Scotia Health Authority, like the community groups that work on the front line, but we're also undermining the leadership that we're seeing in other provinces who are taking this seriously.
Okay, what do you say to those who suggest that this is more of a nanny state, more overreach, and government should stay out of this type of thing? What's your response to that?
Well, of course, this comes up as a topic of conversation, and the thing is, this is also about the broader issue that we have in front of us. We are not talking enough about the health harms and the health risks of alcohol. This is not about nanny state. This is about creating the proper public health guardrails. It's about better informing Nova Scotians and giving them informed consent, and letting them know about the connection between increased alcohol consumption and the risks. But this isn't just us at the Canadian Cancer Society saying this. There are many other stakeholders and frontline organizations and leaders in communities who are dealing and fighting the battle against alcohol every single day. And again, this isn't about access. We have 300 outlets across this province. We have more access to alcohol than we do a double-double. And so again, this is not about consumer convenience. This is not about nanny state. This is about being thoughtful, but also looking across the Atlantic region, looking at what's actually happening across Canada in terms of alcohol policy, and being intentional and thoughtful. I don't want us to be looking at this in 5, 10, 15 years and saying, shoulda, coulda, woulda, if we had only listened to the public health experts. We have an opportunity to stop what we're doing, take a more thoughtful and deliberate approach, take a breather, and then reassess after we've actually engaged the people who are dealing with this work every single day.
Heather, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll
Absolutely.
do it again.
Anytime, Todd.
All right, take care. Heather Mulligan, Senior Manager of Advocacy, Atlantic Canada and Strategic Initiatives at the Canadian Cancer Society. Tick-borne disease is spreading into new parts of Canada. Let's talk about your risks when we come back. Tick-borne disease is spreading into new parts of Canada. What are your risks? Here to join us to talk about all this is Virginie Millien, Associate Professor of Biology at McGill University, who studies the effects of climate change on wildlife such as ticks and their hosts. Professor, welcome to the show. We appreciate your time.
Good morning.
Okay, so looking at the map, there's not many places in Canada, certainly in the southern part of the country, which are escaping the proliferation of ticks, right?
That's correct, and that's because the expansion and establishment of tick population is related to climatic condition. So as climate gets warmer, ticks are happier and survive the winter, and there's more and more of them.
Yeah, even in urban areas, from what I'm reading here in this story.
Yeah, that's correct. You're right. It's because the ticks, they need the right climate condition, but they also need the right habitat. And so anywhere there's green, some grass, a few trees is enough for them to find the adequate suitable habitat.
And if the winter is mild and we don't get that real cold snap, it's just more of them survive. It's pretty simple, eh?
Exactly. That's exactly how it is. So if it's below a certain temperature in the winter, the ticks won't survive it. They'll freeze. They're hiding under the snow. They're hiding in a little cover, but there's still a maximum temperature that's required for them to survive the winter.
How do ticks move around?
They don't really move much by themselves. They're tiny, so they'll go up and down a blade of grass. What's moving them is the host, so the animals, the vertebrates they're feeding on. So it can be aerial or terrestrial way of movement. So migratory birds each year are bringing ticks into Canada from more southern locations. Then once they're there, mammals, small mammals, mice, and white-tailed deer are going to move them around.
Okay, so the tick that we need to be concerned with is the black-legged tick. Is that correct? Are they the only ticks that we should be concerned with?
It's not the only ticks. That's all ticks. They all come with their own pathogens, but the one species of tick is the black-legged tick is carrying the pathogen for Lyme disease.
Okay, so do any other ticks carry that possibility of a neurological disease that could be challenging or problematic, or is that it?
For Lyme disease, it's pretty much the black-legged ticks, yeah. But there's other species of ticks that carry other pathogens. So you just need to watch out for all tick species, really.
What are some of the other pathogens that you're alluding to here?
Yeah, so they all have crazy names, right? But there's the one that makes you intolerant to meat. I don't know if you've heard about that one. But they're all, there's a whole suite of pathogens that these ticks carry. They all have. It's not like Lyme disease. They're not as known as Lyme disease. They don't have a disease name. They carry the name of the pathogen, really, the disease.
Okay, so let's talk about Lyme disease and how common is Lyme disease in black-legged ticks? How many is there a ratio per so many there's Lyme?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when it's just starting to emerge, to occur in a region, there's really a small proportion of ticks that are actually infected, carry the pathogen. But then when you become, when they become established in a region and they reproduce locally, that percentage increase. But it's not necessarily 100%. So if you're out there and get bitten by a tick, there's a few more steps needed before you actually get Lyme disease. The first one is that not all ticks carry the pathogen, up to 20%, 30% maybe, and then it takes a few days for ticks to feed on its host, so that it will transmit the pathogen to its host. So during the blood meal that it takes a few days. So you have time after going out to do a tick check, and if you find a tick and it doesn't look like that doesn't look like a balloon, there's little chance that you've been infected. But then you can always go to a doctor as well. If you know you've been bitten by a tick, you found a tick on you, go to a doctor, because then there's some antibiotics that can be taken to really prevent infection before it gets there. So there's ways to adapt our behavior when we go out, put some DEET and wear some long pants, and then check ourselves after being outside, and to protect ourselves.
Where do ticks usually find themselves on the body? Do they? I've heard armpits and other areas in which they'll try and get to. Is that for warmth or protection, or what's going on there? They're
looking for warm area, but it's going to be around your ankles first that you want to check, because that's where they're not going to be so high up in the vegetation. However, adult ticks can climb a bit higher up. But they're definitely looking for warm areas. We found ticks in the neck or around the waist. So there's there's no area they won't go for. They don't really choose. But they're definitely attracted by the heat, body heat.
Okay, what about the medical community and its response to Lyme? Because I've talked to some people who kind of downplay it, who suggest that it's that everybody thinks they have Lyme disease who have some type of symptoms or what. I don't know. I kind of get the feeling that the medical community is not in lockstep when it comes to how to deal with Lyme and people who appear to be concerned about contracting Lyme disease.
I think that may have been the case to some extent 20, 15 years ago. Now the medical community, there's a protocol. They know what to do when a patient comes and tell them they've been bitten by a tick, or bring the tick even to the doctor's office. The patient will be tested. There's also the public health agencies publish, risk of exposure area. Then there's a protocol where you can get a prophylactic antibiotic. So I think now the knowledge is there. You hear stories about 15 years ago where the knowledge was not there, including in the medical community maybe, because you remember, Lyme disease is new in Canada. It didn't exist not that long ago. So now it is taken seriously, and there's a protocol, and samples are being tested for the public.
Okay, so somebody, it's fine to tick on them, and what's the safe way to remove it?
There's all sort of methods, but the best way is to use these special tweezers or regular tweezers and pull it up. You don't want to twist it, you don't want to break it off and leave the head inside you. If it's been there for long enough, it really buries its head inside under the skin. So you don't want to break that off. But so there's, people talk about oil or burning, or none of this is good. Tweezers, it's just tweezers.
Okay, interesting chat. Professor, thanks for doing this, and hopefully we all have a tick-free summer.
Yes, no, you won't, but just stay safe and protect yourself. That's the answer.
Yeah, when I say tick-free, I mean individually tick-free.
Individually tick-free, for sure.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
All right, Virginie Millien, Associate Professor of Biology at McGill University. We'll talk about the tariffs, aluminum tariffs, and other things with Moshe Lander when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat is Moshe Lander, economist from Montreal's Concordia University. Moshe, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Hello.
All right, so Donald Trump said that tariffs was his favorite word, and unfortunately, that's translating into a conversation about tariffs much more than we had ever thought we would in our lives, right?
Yeah, and it seems to be that the conversation is not about tariffs going away and increasing free trade. It's like we're returning back to the 1930s. So it's not just the frequency, it's the direction that's also worrying.
Yeah, and the volatility and the unpredictability is almost makes things worse.
For sure. Businesses don't like uncertainty. Consumers don't like uncertainty. Governments don't like uncertainty. And so we understand that there's a certain amount of uncertainty that we have to live with. You don't know whether you're going to get hit by a bus or struck by lightning or whether you're going to win the lottery. But we're willing to lead our daily lives with that level of uncertainty. But when you have one person who seems to be just causing chaos on an hourly basis and doing 180s on a daily basis, it's just too much. And we're starting to see the consequences for consumers, businesses, and governments.
Okay, you say we're starting to see the consequences. Expand on that.
So, we're seeing that governments are maybe finding that their budgets aren't as strong as they otherwise would have been. And a lot of governments don't have strong budgets to begin with, but disappearing revenue, disappearing economic activity, businesses moving, increasing job losses, and therefore demands on the public purse for support is wrecking The budgetary process, trying to make forecasts as to what you think is going to happen, makes things difficult. And with the Bank of Canada meeting tomorrow, they're going to have to decide the course of interest rates over the next 6 weeks without a clear idea as to which force is going to outweigh the other. Consumers can't make decisions because you don't know if the products are going to be there or not, or whether you're going to have to pay substantially more for an inferior product because we're boycotting the U.S. or because we have to look elsewhere to get our supply chains met. And businesses can't decide what their future is going to be 5, 10, 30 years out when you don't know what tomorrow is going to mean in terms of your business prospects.
Okay, let's talk about the steel and aluminum industry, which is kind of the epicenter of this right now, with Trump doubling down on tariffs going to up to 50%. When's that going into effect? Tomorrow?
In theory.
Yeah, in theory, exactly. That could change, right?
Yeah, it's subject to change. If it does go into effect, again, it's just such misguided policy. The steel industry deserted the U.S. 40 years ago because they weren't efficient at doing it. The Koreans, the Japanese were much more capable of doing it. Canada was much more capable of doing it. And so it made sense in an integrated supply chain that you would buy it from people who could do it more efficiently or give you a bigger bang for your buck. And that boosted the profits of American industry that required steel. So by imposing those tariffs and thinking somehow those jobs would come back, there's a reason they left to begin with. But there's also the missing thought process that you don't just snap your fingers and create a 50% tariff and there's all of a sudden a steel mill that's fully operational, right, filled with workers and supply chains. So even if they come into effect tomorrow, it's not going to change anything in the short to medium term other than cause chaos for industries that produce steel and that use it as an input in their production process.
So do you anticipate potentially a reprieve from this tomorrow?
Tomorrow, maybe not. But again, when markets start to gyrate and he watches Fox News and he hears that even they are maybe less than supportive of what he's doing, that's when we tend to see the 180. He needs, of course, as always, the ability to have a step down where he can claim victory and success, even though the truth might be something different, but also to give him that cover to say, I did what I said, and this is merely a temporary reprieve.
Okay, it's an interesting story on how much money our revenue is being raised here in Canada as a result of counter tariffs, and it needs to be noted. Of course, I think a lot of people listening get this, but some perhaps don't. That money is coming from Canadians' businesses. Those counter tariffs. That's not coming from the United States. That's coming from us, right?
The vast majority of it, yeah, is coming from Canadian consumers, and that's the reason why free trade is the best form, right? Free meaning that there's no barriers, not free meaning that we give stuff away and not charge, but free trade creates the maximum well-being for society. When you start interfering with trade, there are winners and losers. Businesses that are shielded from foreign competition win. The government wins in that it generates more revenue than it otherwise would have, but consumers overwhelmingly lose. And the thing is that consumers lose more than what those shielded businesses and governments gain. So even if we went and took all of that government tariff revenue and we handed it to consumers saying, I know you're hurting, there's not enough of it to go around. So society is weaker as a result. We call that in economics a deadweight loss. The elimination of those barriers would eliminate the deadweight loss, which means that society would be better off. So I don't know that the government is necessarily looking to profit from tariffs, but it was clear that when we asked for countermeasures, the government was going to make some money here. Unfortunately, it's not even reaching the levels that they expected it would reach when they were talking about it on the campaign trail.
Why do you think that is? Why have they fallen short the revenues?
Well, like anything, it's an estimation method at best. I know the Conservatives were hammering away yesterday during question period saying it's because you went soft, and that elbows up strategy, they're now calling an elbows down strategy. But there is the recognition that if you're going to have these tariffs in place, society will be weaker as a result. So, you had me on a couple of months ago even when I was saying that the best response is no response. And while that wouldn't necessarily satisfy the bloodlust of Canadians that wanted to seek revenge on the U.S., it is the best thing from an economic standpoint. So, when they put in $20 billion, it's an estimate like anything else. They hadn't gone through a budgetary process. And when it's falling short, if they're being a little bit kinder to key strategic industries that are feeders into Canadian industry, yeah, maybe you don't tariff them because it's going to rebound back onto Canadians. And like you said, it's Canadian consumers that are paying the price Had it not been for tariffs, cost of living and affordability issues would have overwhelmingly been the topic of the election. And maybe you don't add to that pain and suffering when it's not even benefiting the economy as a whole.
Right. What about Chinese tariffs? Because to me, this is a story that doesn't get enough oxygen for whatever reason, politically, or what are your thoughts on where are we when it comes to China and tariffs and this war?
So we're, of course, stuck in the middle between the U.S. and China. We do look at China as having maybe some unfair trade practices, but we also recognize that trying to tariff them is similar to trying to tariff the U.S. Their economy is 10 times larger than ours, and they have way more influence over us than we do over them. So any attempt to try and put a tariff on them will rebound back onto us. If we had a little more leverage in the fight, if we put a tariff on them, it might be the type of thing where we could land some of that tariff on their businesses paying the cost of it rather than our consumers. But it's clear that if you're going to try and change China's behavior and business strategy, it's not going to be done through tariffs. So even if negotiation is counterproductive, at least it's not imposing a cost on society. So I think that, yes, there's maybe something that does need to be looked at there, but I think the manner in which we look at it is going to be critical too.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to businesses and their ability to plan and investment, I would think that long-term investment must be a little hesitant or more problematic in order to secure under this environment, because we know that these companies, big-scale companies manufacturing, require investment on an ongoing basis. And lenders and creditors and all that, volatility is not a good match, right?
You're exactly right. And while Canada very much views itself as a service sector economy, which is true, we are also still very much a manufacturing and natural resource-based economy as well. And so when businesses are looking to make a decision when it comes to the service sector can be moved very, very easily. A call center can be set up and moved very fast, or the ability to offer accounting advice, legal advice can be done remotely very easily. But moving a mine, of course, is impossible. Leaving resources in the ground does nobody any good. And of course, moving some sort of manufacturing base is extremely difficult and takes years in the making. So what businesses will do is just say, we're not even going to bother until you give us some clarity as to what exactly the environment is that we're walking into.
Moshe, always great. Appreciate it. And we'll do it again.
Anytime.
All right. Take care. Moshe Lander, economist from Montreal's Concordia University. All right, so now it's time for you folks. Give us a call if you've got something on your mind, 902-405-6000. Something that I caught my attention this morning was a video in which Tim Houston posted on social media talking about thinking big when it comes to the province's future. The Premier is proposing a national energy corridor coast to coast called Wind West. He's floated the idea of building a massive offshore wind farm producing 40 to 66 gigawatts of power. Most of that power would be exported to the rest of Canada, potentially supplying 27% of this country's electricity needs. The Premier says the Nova Scotia government is ready to invest. Private capital is ready to invest, looking to the federal government to step up with funding. The Premier, of course, is also bold when it comes to the development of natural resources, including uranium exploration, despite pushback from some groups and community citizens who claim not nearly enough consultation has been done while environmental and health concerns are being overlooked. So the question is, one of the questions that I'll ask you to consider and to weigh in on, do you support the Premier's bullish approach to resource development and energy? Is it about time we take advantage of these opportunities? Is it time to think big here in Nova Scotia? Or is it reckless and short-sighted in a rush to solve our fiscal challenges? What are your thoughts on that, folks? Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. I got some other things as well in the pile. We'll get to all of it when we come back. All right, we've got some time for you. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. What would you like to talk about today? Again, 902-405-6000. Among the things that perhaps you might want to weigh in on is the fact that Premier Tim Houston is thinking big when it comes to the province's future. This from a video that he released on social media. He's proposing a national energy corridor coast to coast called Wind West. He's floating the idea of building a massive offshore wind farm, producing up to 66 gigawatts of power. Most of that power would be exported to the rest of Canada, potentially supplying 27% of Canada's electricity needs. The Premier says the government is ready to invest, private capital is ready to invest, and they're looking to the federal government to step up with funding. The Premier, of course, is also very bold when it comes to the development of natural resources, including uranium exploration, despite pushback from some groups, which you would expect, and citizens who claim not nearly enough consultation has been done, while environmental and health concerns are being overlooked, according to some. Again. So, do you support the Premier's bullish, aggressive approach to resource development and energy in general? Do you think that it's about time we take advantage of these opportunities? Is it finally time to think big here in Nova Scotia? Or do you think that it's short-sighted and reckless to rush to solve our fiscal challenges? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, whatever side you're on, folks, let's hear from you. Perhaps you think this is about time and it's needed and it's time to think big, or perhaps you have concerns and think that when it comes to resource extraction, these companies can't be trusted, that the environment is too much of a hazard, that our geography does not provide enough space for this to be done safely. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Give us a call. Time for you to weigh in on 902-405-6000. Mark Carney, of course, sat down with oil and gas executives in Calgary Sunday to discuss partnerships and to get their input for his plans to make Canada an energy superpower. Carney, in his first visit to Calgary since being sworn in as Prime Minister, held a closed-door roundtable with more than 24 members of the energy sector. And this is something that certainly Justin Trudeau, I don't think, ever did. And if he did, then I apologize in advance, but I don't think that he did. And some would say that he should have because of Western alienation. And again, is it time that the government looks to energy and pipelines and getting this product to market? Is it critical in a time in which we know we can no longer rely on the United States as a trading partner? Clearly we can't. Not as long as Donald Trump's around anyway, and we don't know what's going to happen when Trump's gone. Perhaps another Republican will have the same methodology or idea or ideology when it comes to trade. And diversification of markets and our economy is the writing is on the wall, according to many economists. Because, again, as the United States becomes an unpredictable and unreliable trading partner, we need to look to other markets. And energy, and certainly natural gas and oil we've been endowed with these resources here in Canada. And so, should Ottawa work with the oil and gas industry? Is oil and gas critical to make Canada an energy superpower? Are environmental concerns taking a backseat to fiscal reality? That or whatever else you've got in your mind. Again, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Something else that caught my attention. Of course, we talked about this last week. Nova Scotia Health says at least 260 additional parking spots will be made free to healthcare workers at our two largest hospitals later this summer. This from the CBC website this morning. Parking has been an ongoing issue for patients and staff at the infirmary and Victoria General and IWK Health Centre, as some parkades have recently been torn down to accommodate renovations and expansions, creating a lot of frustration over parking shortages. At peak demand times, the hospital short 4,000 spaces. 4,000 spaces. Nova Scotia Health and the IWK have been scrambling to find more parking to dedicate to the hospitals. So what has your experience with hospital parking been? Has it been a nightmare? Has it been good? Has it been bad? Perhaps you work at the hospital and you have concerns with parking. That, and of course, the ongoing Nova Scotia Power debate, scandal, whatever you're going to want to call it, of the cyber leak. Are you impacted by that? And are you still frustrated with that? And what are your issues with all of that? That or whatever else you have in your mind. Again, the way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Tim. Hello, Tim.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Very good. Listen, certainly one of many people who received the letter from Nova Scotia Power, absolutely disgusted with the way they've handled it, the way they continue to handle it, and their incompetence. I think as a customer who provides information as per their request to Nova Scotia Power, it's reasonable to assume that the necessary safety precautions will be made to protect that information, because it's not theirs, it's ours, but nonetheless, they have to take responsibility of it. They're the caretaker, and it's reasonable, as I said, for those responsible to take that information. I think a hell of a lot more could be done than just send out a letter saying contact the credit protection. Some people, such as myself, have worked all their lives to establish credit, protect their credit, and then for somebody to say, there you go, thank you very much, continue to pay your bill, is absolutely negligent, and as I said, incompetence.
What else could they do, though? I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way, but what else could they be doing?
I'm not, certainly, I appreciate your comments, but I think it's not what they could have done, it's what they should have done, and I think the necessary safety precautions should have been made to protect whatever. Yes, I'm well aware that there's creative people out there, but at the end of the day, there's a security department. They should be held accountable. To protect that information. If there's 140,000 people on this dark web that their information is floating around there, that certainly can have an adverse impact on people's lives. And at the end of the day, it's one thing to go on CTV and do a 3-minute interview and say thank you very much, goodbye. But I'm not sure if there's lawyers out there that will take this on. I understand there may not be legislation, but something has to be done to protect the customer's information.
Okay, I hear your frustration, Tim, but again, I talked to Wayne McKay yesterday about this, the law professor emeritus, and he says that in this province there is no legislation or vehicle which would allow for any type of legal action, individually or collectively, which is frustrating, Ray.
Frustrating, absolutely. But then, hold those who are elected to be responsible for creating legislation accountable. At some point, if it's not Nova Scotia's responsibility or Nova Scotia Power's responsibility, then it's got to be the politicians. But at some point, somebody has to say, I am accountable for my actions. And if you're in those positions, it's reasonable to assume, as I said, when you provide that information, it'll be held safe and secure. And, you won't be one of many people who got this letter or received this letter from Nova Scotia Power saying, you better take the you better take the necessary precautions to get credit protection for 2 years. What the hell happens after 2 years?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, what happens is people are going to have to start paying out of pocket because like you said, 2 years is that doesn't mean you're safe. Why 2 years? I have no idea.
If I'm on the other end of this, not to interrupt you, but if I'm on the other end of this, I just put that information away,
wait it
aside for 2 years until the credit protection stops, and then I'll do whatever. I'll sell it wherever I need to sell it. But at some point, somebody's going to get severely impacted, and it's going to hurt a lot of people, including and possibly myself.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. And listen, I share your frustration. I received a letter as well. And I'm ticked off. I really am.
Well, I think we all should be.
Yeah.
But somebody, be it the politicians or Nova Scotia Power, there has to be a better response than the ones they certainly provided us thus far.
Okay, Tim. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Chris, hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi there.
I listened to your call yesterday, or your interview with Kevin Russell. Mm-hmm. I think they call themselves now, used to be the Investment Property Owners, the Rental Properties Association of Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
I believe that's what they're called. And there's a lot of talk about these, what type of leases and so on. And I think you started off with the Mount Blanc conversion deal, the condo deal there. But I've got to push back pretty strongly against a lot of the things Kevin said, which I was in the rental business and property management for quite a number of years, as you probably know. And one thing he came out and said was that a lot of the landlords would be keeping units empty if they couldn't get the higher rents and so on. That's the most stupid statement I've ever heard anybody make in regards to rental or business in general. You're not going to keep a unit empty just because you can't get an extra $100 or $200 a month or whatever the case might be. What sense does that make? Do you see any sense in that? I certainly can't.
Yeah, that makes no sense to keep something empty. That's counterproductive entirely.
Well, it's counterproductive, and for every month that a unit goes empty, that's 8% of your year's gross is gone. So when I was in the business, I looked at it, and if I saw a unit coming up and it didn't look like it was going to be rented and I was going to lose a month, I'd lower the rent to get it rented. Because if I'm going to lose money or take a hit on the rent, I'd take it at my choice, the way I want to do it or need to do it, rather than be forced into it and be put farther behind the eight ball. The government's got to look at a different situation of controlling these rents. I'm in favor, and it may sound strange, I haven't been a landlord, but I'm in favor of rent controls and rent caps to a certain degree, but they've got to be done different than what the government has set it out now. A rent control should be on the unit, not the tenant. It should be on the unit, and you should not be allowed to use the fixed-term lease to all of a sudden get around this 5% deal and say, well, I'm going to just put a new tenant in there, and because I'm putting in a new tenant, I can raise it 50% or I can raise it 20% or whatever I want to. We had rent controls years ago. I dealt with rent controls for probably at least 20 years or 15 or 20 years in the business. We had rent controls and so on, and the system worked just fine. If you wanted more than what the cap was that year, and in many cases it was only a couple of 3% per year as an automatic increase, you went for what was called a rent review. You submitted your paperwork, it was reviewed, and if you could justify more than the 2% or 3%, you were given more than the 2% or 3%. That system worked. There was nothing wrong with it. There's a little more bureaucracy involved, I'll admit that, because you needed people to review these things and so on. But you need an audit with that as well. The downfall of that system back 20 years ago or 30 years ago or more was that there was no real audit system set up to find out if the landlord had actually adhered to increases in renovations and if his costs had actually increased to the way he or she was projecting them to do. Debt financing and servicing is the biggest single expense that most landlords will ever face. The big landlords are in a pretty good position because a lot of them use what's called the bond rate, a Canada Mortgage Bond program that's set up by the government for lowering borrowing costs for builders and developers and stuff like that. And right now the bond rate is, or the bond is around, I think 2.87 or 3% or something like that. They don't always get it for that cheap, but it's certainly cheaper than going to RBC or CIBC or one of the conventional banks, and certainly a lot cheaper than you and I would get on a mortgage. So that is pretty much controlled. The other expenses, of course, are not, and I realize as you run your own home and I run my own home, you don't have to be a landlord to know what the increases in insurance, property taxes, and these things are, and they do need it. But Kevin's response to a lot of your questions yesterday was totally ridiculous in my opinion. A lot of landlords are not, getting back to that, leaving units empty. They're not going to leave. You're not going to leave a unit empty, Todd. I mean, that's totally ridiculous. But the government does have to look at it and have more protection for tenants. There's no question about that. And the way the fixed term thing has been abused, I used it a lot because it worked well for students, contract workers, people on work terms and so on that didn't need 12 months. But when Kevin said that it's the fixed-term leases benefit newcomers, first-time renters, fixed and low-income renters, it does not. It does just the opposite. The year-to-year lease benefits those people better because the landlord is then controlled and capped at this 5%. On a fixed-term lease, he's not. So anyway, I think, Kevin, you should look at, if you're listening now, you should look at things and be ashamed of what you said because it's not right. It's putting the wrong slant on the whole thing and misleading people as to the way landlords operate, in my opinion.
Okay, Chris, appreciate your comments as always. Thank you.
Todd, thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call. What's on your mind, folks? We've got lots of open lines for you. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. We've got open lines for you again, 902-405-6000. Nick, hello.
Hello, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. Just want to talk about this Nova Scotia Power thing for a second. I've got a little bit of advice for people if they're willing to listen. And if not, it's at your own peril. I went through this suspected identity theft thing about a decade ago. And I'm going through it again with Nova Scotia Power. Mm-hmm. Basically, my thoughts are it's it's probably nothing, but you should certainly get that protection that they're offering via their letter. The big gap that needs to be filled, however, is the fact that in Canada, there are two credit reporting institutions. There's TransUnion and there's Equifax. Now, when you sign up for the TransUnion credit monitoring service, that's great. They're checking the box. It does nothing for Equifax. So when you get a credit hit, it goes to one or the other. It doesn't go to both, right? So if somebody applies for a new bank account or credit card or whatever, nefariously through the Equifax side, you're still not protected. So I'm pleading with people to call Equifax and turn on the free credit report or the free credit monitoring that they have. You just have to give them a call, tell them about it, and they turn on this free credit monitoring for 6 years. If anybody tries to open a new account or do a credit hit or whatever on your Equifax side credit account,
Right.
they will call you. It will call you and ask you for authorization before they give the information out.
So TransUnion would get some hits that Equifax wouldn't get, or does Equifax get all of it?
Well, we operate with two credit reporting institutions in Canada, and you can use either or. You don't have to use both, and they don't communicate with each other.
Right.
They're competitors. So if you only sign up with that letter, if you only sign up for the TransUnion protection that Nova Scotia Power is recommending, you're still not protected on the Equifax side.
Okay, so there's nothing that gathers information from both of them then? Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly. It's only half of the solution to protecting yourself.
Well, Nova Scotia Power should be providing coverage for both then, in my opinion. It's a no-brainer.
Well, they should at least be advising because it's free for Equifax.
Yeah. Well, that makes no sense. That makes no sense that they wouldn't be advising that for sure.
I hear you.
Yeah. So you, when you said you went through this 10 years ago, did you have any credit open up in your name, or was there anything compromised?
No, what turned out to be happening, because I started getting a whole bunch of phone calls from creditors saying, you owe us money, this is due. It was somebody with the same name. And,
I see.
The credit companies, like the loan sharks, were just looking up the wrong guy.
So how'd you get that sorted out?
I turned on the protection and it sat there for 6 years. And every time I tried to, get a new credit card or a bank account or whatever, as soon as I put that report in across the desk from the teller, my phone rang and I picked it up and they said, hey, are you trying to open a new bank account? And I said, yes. And that was that.
Wow.
It's that easy. They just give you a call so that you can authorize whatever you've asked.
Right on. So your advice is use the TransUnion that they're offering for free for 2 years and Equifax sign up for free.
Both, yeah. The letter only covers half of your credit opportunities, right?
Okay, Nick, good advice. Thanks for the call.
All right, cheers.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's good advice, folks. Again, 902-405-6000. What's on your mind today? We've got lots of open lines for you. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. We'll continue with the open hour when we come back.
Facts.
All right, continuing with your calls. Way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Tim regarding the playoffs. And, of course, the Edmonton Oilers are taking on the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final, which begins tomorrow. And I mentioned the fact earlier that the time zone was a challenge, and Tim says, you said the other day you didn't think as many would watch because of the start time. I'm sure you just overlooked, but this year they were introducing a 9 p.m. as a standard start time regardless of the host city in the last round. And I'm sure in previous rounds as well, I think it's not 8 o'clock or 11 o'clock. All the final games have a 9 p.m. start. I'm sure this will be the way of the future. All right, so there you go. So I'm not sure if it's. I'm sure that it's 9 o'clock Atlantic time or Eastern time, but I'm assuming it's 9 o'clock Atlantic, which would make a difference for sure. and I'm sure that it will drive more viewership. I still probably won't watch any of it for whatever reason. I don't know. When the Leafs are out, I'm out. That's kind of the way I am. Same as generally baseball. When the Yankees aren't involved, I generally don't pay attention. Shouldn't say pay attention. I'll watch the highlights, but I won't watch the game. That said, if the Oilers are on the cusp of winning the Stanley Cup, and if they're in that position, perhaps I'll tune in. Look, I'd like to see the cup return to Canada. I'd like to see the Oilers win, but I'm not passionate about it the way that I would certainly be the Leafs. That said, that's smart. I think if they move the time zone, which they have, I think that's a smart idea. Good decision. 902-405-6000. Give us a call. What's on your mind today on this Tuesday? John, hello.
Hello, Todd. Good morning.
Hi.
I just got a question. I last had a contract with Nova Scotia Power, 2018. I shut that down at that point as I was getting married, and my wife then put the power contract under her name. I'm just wondering, is this a gray area for people that didn't receive it? I didn't receive a letter. I don't know if my contract was still with Nova Scotia Power. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
Okay, so
they don't have my address.
You're a Nova Scotia Power customer, are you?
I'm a former Nova Scotia Power customer.
I see. Okay, so you're concerned that perhaps your data may have been compromised and they didn't tell you?
And they have no way of telling me because I since moved on.
Yeah.
I'm still in Nova Scotia, but they don't have my mail and address anymore or nothing. So.
Yeah, John, I really can't weigh in on this either way. I'm not sure. I would say that if I were in your situation, I probably wouldn't be concerned about it. That said, no. you could call them and ask if they have any of your information on file. I suppose if it put your mind at ease.
Yeah. Okay. So that sounds like
give them a call, John, and just ask. Say, look, I'm a former customer, and I'm wondering if you have any of my information on file, and that would put your mind at ease, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, John. Take care. 902-405-6000. Stephen, hello.
Hey, Todd. Happy, what is today?
Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. The guy who called in earlier about Equifax and it's free.
Yeah.
The answer is yes, but if you go to their website, they want your SIN number and personal information. So I get my credit reporting through Bank of Montreal. I click on it; it goes to credit reporting agency, but it's not free. And then there's somebody storing your personal information online. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not necessarily free. It's free, but you have to give them information, and you have to give them your SIN number, your first name, last name, mailing address, phone number, everything. So before you jump, you have to look where you're leaping, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I think in fairness, Stephen, anybody who's monitoring credit is going to need that information.
Absolutely, 100%. But I do it through my bank. So BMO has a connection that they link my information to a credit reporting agency.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about providing that info.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't know that.
That's Bank of Montreal. I don't know if TD or the other ones are similar, but there's a link on online services that I can click onto. But if you go to Equifax and you want to sign up, sure, it's free, but you got to give them a ton of info. And if they get hacked, that's all your info.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So when I file my forced government donation at the end of every year called taxes. I do it all through Bank of Montreal, and I use them as a trusted representative.
Well, the thing is, Stephen, that may be and that's all sounds good, but that information is still going to be provided, all that personal information, to Equifax. It's not like you can circumvent or get around that either way. They're going the credit monitoring and the credit reporting agency is going to get your information, whether you give it to them or whether the Bank of Montreal gives it to them. Somebody's going to give it to them.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But they shouldn't be providing they should not be providing my SIN number.
Well, again, financial institutions, from what I've been told, are allowed to ask for your SIN number.
Oh, I'm not an expert in that area, so I can't tell you.
Yeah.
But you can go to Equifax online and sign up. It's free, but you got to provide a ton of info.
Yeah. Okay, Stephen.
And I don't know if people are comfortable providing that amount of information.
Well, again, I don't think you have a choice, really. And that's the reality that we're living in right now. Is we have to trust and turn over our information to somebody, because that's the way the world works now. That's the way all of this works. It's unfortunate. And you're right. And you're absolutely right. I mean, God forbid when the time comes that Equifax and TransUnion get hacked, because I'm sure that people are desperately trying to hack them. Why wouldn't they? And I would like to know what type of protections they're putting in, and how much money of their revenue they're investing to protect our information, because I think that this is just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately, in the world that we're living in. You're completely right. I work in corporate security, so you're completely right. And there's so many things we have to do to comply with regulations that the government makes and the financial institutions make. But you're right. Ultimately, they're going to get nailed. Yeah. Todd, I really can't disagree. Yeah, unfortunately. With what you're saying at all. Okay. I just wanted to say when you sign up for something and you say it's free, it's not really for free. Sure. Well, neither social media or Facebook or Instagram or all that, people say it's free. No, your information is the currency that they're using. And I've got rid of all that. Yeah, there you go. Me too. Thanks for the call, bud. Well, just like you. Okay. Thanks, bud. Gotta go. Because, by the way, one last thing before I go. I am not a Lady Gaga fan, but I'll always remember us this way. I'm friggin' addicted to that song. There you go. Thanks, pal. So, okay. Go. All right. Thanks a lot. 902-405-6000. Joe, hello.
Todd, I'm not going to ask you how you are, because to be honest with you, I don't care, and you don't care about how I am. But having said that, all right. I listened to Chris, the fellow that was talking about rent control. Yeah. And just a couple things to say. I also this issue with Nova Scotia Power. Back in my day, when we were given social insurance numbers, we were guaranteed by the government they would not be used for personal individual identification. It would not. So that was a promise I remember. And all the promises I've made, I can't remember maybe two from any politician that's ever been kept. But there's a cost to the way we live. And people just, they don't want to hear it. It's called convenience. All this crap that's being shoved at us and down our throat is justified by saying, well, it'll be more convenient for you. And that's total tripe. It's not true. But that's the society we've allowed we has been created for us, and we suck up. I don't use I won't give anybody my social insurance number. There are now Revenue Canada has it, so I really can't protect myself at all. I'm going to be collateral damage in the processes of progress for humanity. But their convenience is our biggest enemy. People are sold things that are just total crap on the basis that it's going to be more convenient for you. It's going to be easier. That's not why I called, but I get so roiled up because anytime I step outside my door, it's a poop show. It's an absolute poop show. Matter of fact, I don't even have to step step outside my door. I live in a high-rise in Halifax, and I rent from one of the biggest developers in Nova Scotia, and the place is horribly run. It's abysmal. And I'm thinking, Tim Houston, who I happen to favor, I think he's doing the best he can and doing a pretty okay job, has allowed developers to have a 5% yearly increase, and that's bogus. The government across the board is struggling to get inflation down to a 2% rate. Why the hell would they allow these developers 5%? Because they not only get the 5%, but then they're cutting back on their maintenance, they're cutting back on the quality of their staff, the training for their staff. I live in a building that thousands of people probably drive by every day in central Halifax, and we don't have anybody running the building. We have no one in charge. And to try to get someone in charge, then to hire someone, the hoops you have to jump through, the way that the rental business is running today it's like Dodge City back in the 1850s. It's a Wild West show. And there doesn't seem to be anywhere we can go to get things fixed. There's no one out there fixing things for us. So anyway, that's all I got to say. How are you now?
Well, look, I hear your frustration, Joe. So you say you like Tim Houston's approach. What do you like about it?
Say again?
What do you like about Tim Houston's approach? Or what he's doing?
You know what I like? You know what sold me? I like the guy right from the get-go. I like the cut of his jib, as they say. Mm-hmm. He's a pretty direct, no BS kind of guy. Yeah. But I sort of, when he was running his first election, and he's running against Ian Rankin, who, by the way, I'm surprised is still in politics. They were talking about rent controls, and they wouldn't have them. The Liberals or the Conservatives, they wanted nothing to do with them. And I was just 3 feet in the air. I was so pissed off. And then Houston, after he got elected with a majority government, he came back to the public and made the announcement, I've talked to some people in the industry, I've considered everything, and I'm going to cut that back to 2 or 2.5%. And he had no reason to do that. He had already won by a majority. And to me, that told me the guy's the real deal. He's a no BS kind of guy. And I haven't seen him do anything except this 5% increase for developers. I don't think it's justified. And I'm a senior. My rents in this building, I've been here 13 years, have doubled and tripled in the last 7-8 years, maybe not even that long. And the maintenance has been cut back. And they don't have anyone, believe this or not, they don't have anyone in charge of this building. And I have to make a call downtown, jump through all these hoops, and get transferred and put on hold. And there's no one looking after our building. Whoa. They've cut expenses to the bone, and it's abysmal. It's a real disgrace. So how do you like me now, Todd?
Well, there you go, Joe. I hear your frustration, pal. Anyway, thanks for the call, bud. Call again.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Gary, hello.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi, Gary.
To answer for one of your previous callers there, I left Nova Scotia a year ago, shut down my power account in Calgary. 15 minutes before this gentleman called, I had just got off the phone with Nova Scotia Power. The lady was very good, very helpful. She found out that my information wasn't compromised. I said, how long do you keep her information for? She said, private people up to 7 years. Mm-hmm. I asked her if we can have that removed, and the only thing she could do was send an email to the Privacy Commission, and she's going to get back to me and let me know that. So they hold your information for 7 years as a private citizen and 15 years, I think, for a company.
Right. So that must have been relieving to know that they don't have any of your information?
That was a big relief. Yes, I'm breathing a lot easier now.
I'll bet. Too bad the rest of it.
The fact that they hold your information so long is crazy to me. She said it's for tax purposes, but they were very helpful. So I was happy that the person I talked to, she got back to me within 5 minutes to tell me that I wasn't compromised. So it went great.
Okay, Gary, good to hear, pal. Thank you for the call.
Have a good day.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. We get some time for you to the top of the hour. Get some open lines as well. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. This email from Jillian in response to the Nova Scotia power breach. She said, a caller prompted me to write this email to try and get the word out. I called Nova Scotia Power on behalf of a family member to inquire about deactivated accounts, and they told me they do keep that information on file in case you want to reactivate it in the future. They recommended calling them to see if your information was on one of the servers that was compromised. Add this to the pile of information Nova Scotia should be telling the public. Additionally, I did receive a letter about my information being affected and called to see if they could tell me if they ever had my social insurance number, and I can't recall whether or not I gave it to them, but they said they were unable to tell me, which was extremely disappointing. Obviously, my level of concern will vary greatly if my social insurance number has been compromised. This information that they 100% should be able to find out and give their customers. That comes from Jillian. And yes, I agree that this, look, it's pretty simple, folks. No system is perfect. I get that. And any system, no matter how many safeguards you put in place, there's always going to be vulnerabilities. It's like Alcatraz, right? Alcatraz was designed so that nobody could escape. And nobody could even contemplate how somebody could escape, yet somebody figured it out. So securities and safeguards are there for a reason, and nothing is perfect. That said, though, folks, when you are holding people's information, and you're an organization like Nova Scotia Power, which is hugely profitable, and returns all kinds of money, a guaranteed rate of return to investors, you would expect that they would be at the forefront of cybersecurity, especially considering what they deliver and the infrastructure that we rely on. You would think that they would be at the forefront of cybersecurity and out in front of this thing and being as proactive, and yet we have no answers as to how much money they've invested into cybersecurity over the years, because the CEO will not come on the show and answer the question as to, that'd be my first question. How much money have you invested in cybersecurity? What was your plan up until the breach, and what are you doing now? And I would want those details, and it should be public information anyway, in my opinion. Now, we could FOI pop them, but that would cost a fortune and spend all kinds of time doing that. So Nova Scotia Power is it's a waiting game. They're waiting everybody out. They're just waiting until eventually the story goes away. That's what they're doing. Like always, because they have the monopoly, and what the hell can anybody do about it? When all is said and done, what can you do about it? Besides call the show or send them letters or complain? Nothing. Because you have no choice. You have no other alternatives. And again, the fact that the CEO will not come on the show, and Vanessa, will you please send another request to them? CEO of Nova Scotia Power, to have him on the show again? Please. Thank you. Won't come on the show. My first question would be, how much money have you spent on cybersecurity? What is your detailed plan? How much effort have you put into this? And what are you doing in response to this in order to beef up your security? First two questions. I would bet a lot of money that they have had a lackluster effort and investment in cybersecurity. That would be my guess. And if I'm wrong, then come on the show and prove me wrong. I'd be happy to put you on. James wants to call about Nova Scotia Power. James, thought I'd get you on. Go ahead.
Hi. Glad to get in before noon here. I agree completely with everything you just said about Nova Scotia Power. Monopoly, yeah, regulated monopoly, but calling them is, well, as you've discovered, the CEO's too afraid to come on the show. But it is a regulated monopoly, so the government ultimately could pass some regulations that would require more transparency, et cetera. So I guess it'd be a long process, but call your MLA or call an opposition MLA who's more likely to maybe take up the cause.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. You're absolutely right. Thanks, James.
Great. Thanks.
All right, take care. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Listen, I didn't get to all of you for that. I apologize. Okay, well, I've been told that it's Gloria McCluskey's birthday today, so happy birthday to Gloria. Let's see, somebody sent me an email about this, I think. How old's Gloria, do we know? I think she's 94. I think that's the date. That's what somebody just sent me an email, 94 years old. Anyway, if I'm wrong, Gloria, I apologize. But a happy birthday to you, Gloria, and many more to come. And hopefully you give us a call tomorrow or later on in the week so we can wish you a belated happy birthday. So happy birthday, Gloria McCluskey. The Science Files with Rob Thacker. We'll come back. All right, it's the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Give us a call if you'd like to talk to Rob Thacker about anything science-related, of course. 902-405-6000. That is the way to get in on the action. Like always, again, 902-405-6000. Rob Thacker, you are busy right now, coming from a pretty cool conference that you're hosting at St. Mary's.
Yeah, I've literally run in from the conference. I hope nothing goes wrong. So, yeah, we're hosting the Canadian Astronomical Society National Conference. So this is all of the research astronomers in campus, or in Canada, on campus at St. Mary's, and we've got over 200 people. And so it's going well so far.
Okay, what's some of the cool subject matter?
So we've got astronomers that pretty much do everything you can think of, from solar system astronomy to studying the universe as a whole, cosmology. And so the first prize talk, which was the award for the best thesis, went to literally a talk by William Thompson out of the National Research Council in Victoria. And so he was talking about work that he did to improve our ability to detect planets around other stars. And that's incredibly hard because stars are really bright, and planets, all they do is reflect the light. They're not particularly bright at optical wavelengths. And so there are techniques that they use to get rid of the brightness of the star, right? And he was talking about some new techniques they've come up with to actually get rid of that brightness so we can actually see the planets. It's really impressive. They're trying to target sort of planets that are a little bit like Jupiter at the moment. It's very difficult to do this for Earth-sized planets, but for things like Jupiter, we're starting to find a lot more of them.
Is Jupiter the biggest planet in our solar system?
Yep.
Yeah. What ratio would it be compared to the Earth?
Jupiter is a few times more massive than Saturn, not lots more massive than Saturn. They're both pretty big. So, but I will say, in the scheme of planets in general, I mean, Jupiter is the biggest thing we have in our solar system, but there are planets that are significantly bigger than Jupiter out there in other planetary systems.
Yeah, for sure. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. What creates a planet? How is the planet created?
Ooh, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
So we have a pretty good sort of like general idea of how planets form, and that's that the material that forms the star, as you're forming the star, you also form a disk around the star. And that happens really naturally as things collapse down under their gravity and they start spinning. They just spin up faster and faster and faster. So you kind of pancake the thing. It's not quite what's happening, but that's basically what it ends up looking like. And then within that disk, the planets will actually start forming out of that disk. There'll be little sort of like, some bits will be denser than others, and over their mutual gravitation, they will actually start attracting together and start forming bigger and bigger clumps, and those clumps eventually become planets.
Yeah, so the planets all come from other parts of the solar system, obviously, like the material itself.
There's a disk of material, a pre-solar disk, and so that will actually be the thing that planets end up forming out of.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing if you consider that what all that we see came from somewhere.
Oh, I mean, I love to point out that the material that we have in us, I mean, the atoms in our bodies itself have to have come from stars that died a long time ago.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
It is a bit bonkers.
It's mind-boggling if you think about it.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, it connects you to these things that are a long way away and in the past.
And for all our differences as human beings, we have a lot more in common than we do differences.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's true whether you look at the physics, the chemistry, or the biology. I mean, our DNA is incredibly similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Stephen's giving us a buzz. Hello, Stephen.
Oh, sugar snaps. Sorry. Just eating lunch. Two questions for Dr. Rob.
Sure.
Earth wobble. Does it change?
So when you say wobble, what do you mean?
Well, I know it's not set straight up and down. It's on a sort of an angular
Okay, yes. So
item. Does it actually change, or is it the same?
So it will do what we call precess. Right, so the spin axis of the Earth will change, but that's over a fairly long period of time, right?
Okay.
So to see, as it changes, you'll see the pole star will actually change. The rotation axis will point in different places on the sky, but that takes thousands of years.
Oh, okay. So pretty much not before I'm dead.
No, yeah.
Now, the other question is, you are a giant Star Trek fan. And so if you look at Rathacon and Picard, could you or should you go into a nebula?
Okay. So you're making me sort of talk about my pet hate with Star Trek. So nebulas are not even remotely as dense as we see them portrayed on Star Trek. It's quite funny, right? If you're inside a nebula, it's only fractionally different from normal space, right? The reason why they look so sort of like solid and dense is because you're looking through an enormous distance, right? And that enormous distance, having just even a little bit of stuff in, allows you to see something that looks actually significantly more dense than the material around it. But I mean, if you compare a regular nebula to a vacuum on Earth, they'd be about the same.
Yeah. So assuming you had a starship that could get there, which we don't have.
Okay.
Should you even go into one?
Sure. It's not going to... I mean, here we go. If you're going very, very fast, right, so close to the speed of light, and then a nebula is still a higher density area, so the possibility of having some kind of collision with something would go up.
Okay. My brain went to Rathacon.
That's a bit... I sort of take my brain out when I watch that.
Well, anything I watch with Jay and Silent Bob, I take my brain out too. But it's so... Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
A question I've been 3 weeks trying to answer, or get a question to you, and you had a great vacation, so
all right.
Have a nice day.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Is it a prerequisite to be an astrophysicist, to be a Star Trek fan? Is that required?
No, there actually are astronomers who don't particularly like Star Trek or Star Wars. Not very many, I will say that, but there are some. And there's different strokes, right? People.
Yeah, for sure.
But one thing I do want to say is we do have a public lecture tonight. Mm-hmm. So this is by J.J. Cavallars, who's a really world-renowned expert on the solar system. So he happens to be in Victoria. So he's here to talk about cosmic fossils and the origins of planets, so how we can use information about asteroids and things that are very far out, icy bodies in the solar system, to understand the processes by which planets actually fall.
And it's free to the public?
Absolutely free to the public, yeah. But it's not ticketed, so if you want to be there and get a seat, show up early.
Okay,
it's 7 p.m. tonight at SMU.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. Fran's giving us a call. Hello, Fran.
Oh, hi, Dr. Rob?
Yeah.
Hey, question for you. How much you know about these spray programs? They go around neighborhoods and they spray for, I guess, weeds and stuff like that. What do you know about those as far as the chemicals you're using and how much of that goes into the lakes? Thinking of all the blue-green algae we have,
right,
and the fact that we're still spraying our lawns with chemicals.
So with algal blooms, the thing that you're really going to be concerned about is actually fertilizer runoff, right? Not necessarily sprays so much, right? So algal blooms basically happen because of a combination of sunlight plus nutrients, and along with the algae to actually feed. So that's not so much of an issue. I'm not sure what kind of sprays they're using. I mean, I know what's used on what we have for our lawn care. That's fairly quick to degrade. That stuff actually degrades very quickly. That's why it's still a controlled spray. But basically, that once you put it on, it's got a few days, and then it's pretty much broken down. All right.
But that would run into our storm systems, right? Which eventually
but it's going to chemically break down, so it's not going to be as potent herbicide after a few days.
Okay, so it's fairly safe then.
I mean, even some of the more serious stuff like glyphosate, I mean, that will break down over time, right? But you don't want to use tons of that stuff. It's just not good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's fairly safe, and it's probably not causing.
Yeah, I mean, they've changed the availability of things like Roundup and so on. So, we can't go and buy that here, right? So you still might be able to get it in some other provinces, but we can't. So everything that we have in Nova Scotia seems to be sort of like pushed towards the sort of like safer side of herbicides.
Okay, so fairly safe. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can do. To be fair, you can do stupid things with herbicides if you put too much on, right? But that's the whole point of having controlled spraying, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well,
okay, Fran. Thanks for the call, pal. Take care at 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us again, 902-405-6000. If you've got a question for Rob Thacker, give us a buzz. We get open lines for you again, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist, of course. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob, 902-405-6000. Aaron, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well.
I have a question about uranium mining in the province there.
Okay.
See a lot of social media posts with some good, some bad information, but one of them that was a bit concerning I read, saying that anywhere you dig for uranium, there's about 100-kilometer radius that could be potentially poisonous to the human body. And even after everything's dug up, the tailings that are left behind could be radioactive for 10,000 years potentially. I was just wondering if that had any viability to it. If they're going to be, mining in the middle of the province, 100-kilometer radius is quite large.
So I'm not sure where the 100 kilometers comes from. I mean, so one of the things is when uranium mining...
Hang on a sec, Rob. Aaron, do you mind if I let you go and you listen over the air because your cars are loud? That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'm not sure where 100 kilometers comes from, but a lot of uranium mining now is done essentially by using solvents to get to the uranium, put it in a liquid form, and then
what's
move
a solvent?
It's literally something that will dissolve the thing you want, right? Okay. So you're literally going to take, I can't even remember what the particular yellow cake chemical formula is, but you'll pump that into the ground and you'll have another way of retrieving that solvent, right? So there is always concern when you do any kind of processes like that of where it winds up going. But 100 kilometers is a long way underground. So I'm not sure where that number comes from. Now, in terms of long-term radioactivity, the main thing to remember, if you have tailings processing or something like that, like a uranium processing plant or something like that, you are concentrating the uranium when you do that. That's an inevitable part of actually processing, that you start concentrating so you get to the metallic form that you want. And the fact of the matter is, there's a number of places in the States where they've literally just said, okay, what are we going to do? We've run the processing plant. There's still a fair amount of radioactivity here. We've got to do something about it. And they literally build stone sarcophagi over them, right? In some cases, there's a huge amount of stone just put over an area to cover it up. They'll have probably vents on it because uranium will decay into radon gas, right? You've got to vent that. And so, but all that said and done, once you put the stone on top of it, you've capped it, it's in place, it's not really going to go anywhere, right? So that is a pretty effective method of doing it, right?
Okay, kind of like the Sydney tar ponds.
I mean, it's so one of the things that people often have a difficulty in dealing with is when you have a pollutant. Yeah. Very often, the best thing to do is to cap it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And this is true of, say, all of the gold mine tailings that we have here. Like, in fact, my partner is actually working on this directly. That the best thing you can do is literally find a way to keep it in the ground and keep it there. Because if you dig it up, you're literally moving the problem somewhere else.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's hard for people to get their heads around sometimes because we're so used to people saying, well, can we dig it up and move it somewhere else? Right. And the reality is, if it's a pollutant, whether you have it here or there.
Right. It's kind of like asbestos. If left untouched, it doesn't create.
Well, as long as there's no abrading going on or anything like that with the fibers. Yeah.
Not just people shouldn't have mitigate when you have asbestos.
Yeah. I mean,
in your house, but.
For sure. I mean, ironically, I had to test some paper that we had underneath floorboards to see whether that had any asbestos in because our house was built in 1965, but it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So asbestos, seriously, you have to be really careful with that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess it's the same principle. Left untouched, it's probably benign.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's sealed away in something, then you're good. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the main thing.
Okay,
you're good as can be.
Right, 902-405-6000. Eric, hello.
Good day, Todd.
Hi there.
Dr. Thacker, I've been watching a young geophysicist. He's around 40. His name's Stefan Brun, and he's been talking about all the solar activity that's going on right now, these geomagnetic storms and CMEs and all that kind of stuff. And part of what he says is that I don't know if he's saying it's a correlation or if it's a causation, but it seems that since these flares have been hitting the Earth, there's been a lot of radio disturbance and also a lot of earthquake activity. In your view, are all those things related? And the second part of the question is, how much damage could these things do to the grid, and are they prepared?
So I struggle to see how... And I'm not a geophysicist, so I'm not going to say that I really understand this detail, but I struggle to see how geomagnetic storms are going to create enough stress in the crust to have a significant impact. I really don't see that. I mean, yes, if you have a magnetic field that's moving and you have a very long power line or something like that, it will create a very significant current, right? Very significant, enough to sort of, well, not electrocute people, but create really big sparking jumps. Right, so that is an issue for sure. So the geo side of it, I'm not going to put my neck out on that one. I struggle to see how you could have really significant. But if someone has thought about it, whatever. Okay, but in terms of their impact on the grid, yes, they are very significant. So if we had a very big solar storm, like something like the Carrington event of the 1800s. That would have a really significant impact on our electrical grid. And everyone who's concerned about the safety of the electrical grid is worried about this. And so there's a lot of effort in trying to create what's called disconnect systems and so on that would be able to be put in place. But at the end of the day, when you have a very, very long piece of wire and a changing magnetic field, it is inevitable that you will get a current generated in that situation. It's just physics. So there's only so much we can do, and there probably would be some fairly significant damage if we had another event like the Carrington event.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing I was curious about, when they had that power blackout there over in Portugal, Spain, and France, they were saying it had something to do with the ionosphere. Did you have any look at that, or do you have any?
I haven't looked at
that,
that, but that would be the place where you can get significant electrical discharge, right? And so again, but you need to have the magnetic field coming all the way down to the ground and having an impact on all of the power lines that are down at the ground, right? That's the key thing to remember.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care. You got it. 902-405-6000. That's what it reaches for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's see. Let's go to the phone. Carl, hello.
Hello. I often see illustrations with heavy objects in the universe warping time and space. Mm-hmm. I assume it also warps distances. To make things farther apart.
It does, but it's a subtle thing, right? The way things manifest in space is really quite complicated and relates to the particular way of describing space. I'm sorry, this is going to sound very convoluted, but what you end up doing is, if we have regular sort of like flat space, as it were, which is something without something very heavy in it, then the actual radial coordinate away from the heavy object will get kind of compressed as you get closer and closer to it. That's the best way I can describe it, right? So yes, so there is a difference in both space and time, sure.
Okay, and can I ask you another question?
Okay, Carl, do you mind if I put you on hold and you can do it after the break?
Okay,
We're just up against the break. Okay, stick there. 902-405-6000. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, give us a call, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Again, 902-405-6000. We're chatting with Carl before the break. Carl, you had a follow-up question, so go ahead.
Yes, you had mentioned earlier that the planets were formed from disks of material that pull together. And I assume in that disk was some of the material that came from supernova, like some gold and platinum. Would you not expect that to be relatively concentrated, around the world, rather than spots with a lot of it and spots with hardly any?
So,
like uranium and gold, and I know there's Earth forces.
No, this is actually a really lovely question because it speaks to a ton of different things. So if you sort of think about the center of the Earth, which to all intents and purposes is very radioactive and very molten, right, then within that you're going to have a pretty even distribution of those elements, right? But as you come out from the center of the Earth, then you're going to have situations where you could have deposits that were related to impact events or something like that. And it's not going to be as evenly distributed once you get out from the center, right? And so we know the best element to pick for that is nickel, right? Because with nickel, you can have extremely high concentrations of that element in asteroids, right? And then if you have an asteroid collide with the Earth, then you have, ta-da, your nickel mine is right there, right? So for gold, there are particular processes that end up leaching gold out when it's in the ground. And so those processes are not sort of uniform. They happen in concert with other chemical reactions that work for other elements. And so that's essentially what you go and look for, though, where those reactions have been happening in the crust, and those end up being gold deposits.
So it would be similar with uranium in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, there's a great online talk, I think, by Erin Adlacher, a professor at SMU, about exactly this.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Ken, hello.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi there.
I got a quick question about the summer's reading time. If Dr. Rob's got any recommendations for books on, astronomy, and, maybe for the beginners and for somebody who's studied it a little bit.
Oh, I feel like a complete doofus because I honestly, most of my reading is really reading papers, right? I'm not an avid book reader myself. And I'd love to sort of like sit down and tell you that, oh, you should go and read whatever. But I'm terrible. I can't really give you good recommendations. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm just being totally upfront. I mean, I could literally go and Google something, but that's not me making suggestions. So.
Thanks, Ken.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. 902-405-6000. Steve, hello.
Hey, Dr. Thacker, thanks for taking my call, Todd.
Sure.
My question's around something that's in the news a lot right now. Outside the obvious environmental risks with water contamination, soil contamination, stuff like that, what other health effects would proposed uranium mining that's being proposed by the Premier now have on the residents of Nova Scotia?
So, sort of forgetting about things of like stuff in the ground and concentrating things. What else could there be?
Yeah, what's the risk outside of if the mine itself isn't managed properly and groundwater isn't managed properly? And those things.
Yeah. So
what are we looking at?
Well, I mean, if you have a situation in which you've got some kind of leaching happening, so whether it's acid mine leaching or whatever, and then that's getting into the water table, then that's obviously not going to be a good situation. But I would say within reason, like no one knows everything underground. It's tricky, right? But within reason, most mines are very careful about uranium mines are very careful about trying to avoid that. I would say tailings ponds are not great. there's often secondary elements that are involved other than, if you pick gold tends to co-appear with arsenic, right? So whenever you create tailings ponds, you'll have both the gold and the arsenic, and then on top of that, you'll have mercury as well, potentially, from this separating the gold out using mercury. So tailings ponds in general are not great, right? I think that's understood. I think that there is a lot better regulation on them than there has been, but there's still always an element of risk. But there's elements of risk with everything we do, with pretty much most large-scale mining at some sense or another. Like, obviously, you have safety protocols in mines they are dangerous places, right? So, with anything that we do, there is always a risk of accident. There's risks of accidents when you have any kind of nuclear operation. There's no question of getting away from that. But at the same time, if you look at the overall health impacts of, say, let's pick burning coal, right? People at the end of the day are impacted by that. You have lung health issues in certain places because of that, right? So there are drawbacks there as well.
So the juice would be worth the squeeze in this case, then. If things are managed properly and the experts say, hey, uranium mining is safe, and if it's done properly, and on that side of the house, and the experts and the government agrees with the experts, and then what would be the overall concern?
Well, so here's the thing to remember with measures of risk, right? Everyone has different comfort level with risk, right? And that's one of the things that makes the public discussion about anything based on nuclear a difficult one, right? Because there are some people who are like, we don't want to risk it at all, right? And there are other people like, oh, it's a really good base load and so on. The reality is it's still very expensive, of course, right? And so unless there is a significant drop in the costs of nuclear reactors, it's not going to be competitive with wind, solar, and storage, right? There has to be a significant drop. And people are saying small modular reactors will do that, but not everyone is convinced of that, right?
Yeah.
So look, it's a difficult question, right? And to be honest, I'm about to do a bit of research on this myself, right, to see more about what the risks are. I mean, one of the things that hasn't been talked about very much is what the possible combination of different issues with uranium could do. So if you have uranium combining with other things, is there an issue there? Or, for that matter, all of the processing chemicals that are used to mine uranium, if they could interact in one way or another with something else, there are questions there. This is called multi-stressor analysis. And so that hasn't been done for the nuclear industry in Canada yet. And so that needs to be done.
Well, we're looking forward to having you back on the show when you get that research done so you can clear everything up for us all.
It's going to be a few months, but sure.
Okay, Steve?
Thank you.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. And look, when you talk about anything, like you said, Rob, risk is always involved, and there's always going to be give and take, including offshore wind, right? Premier Tim Houston is proposing a national energy corridor, coast to coast, called Wind West, and he talked with this on social media yesterday, and a massive offshore wind farm producing 66 gigawatts of power the installation. You're going to have effects on the ecosystem, on marine life.
Yep.
And on it goes, right? So there's no free ride here.
So actually, there's quite a lot of damage done when you blast or drive the pilings. Right. So that does a lot of damage, and literally that's a very, very loud thing that goes. Sound travels a long way through water. So that actually is not good. The flip side is they've done a number of studies in Europe that have shown once these things are in place, you can actually build fish breeding habitats around the poles. And this is some cool research that's been done to show that actually those end up being a net positive in the end, right? But I will say, yes, if you're driving piles and so on into the seabed, that's not good for sea life at all, right? That's going to just kill things, basically.
And birds, migratory birds.
So the migratory birds risk is one thing that's really interesting, because the studies on that, they're quite contradictory. Right, and there seems to be an issue of how how the wind farms are oriented, what their spacing is, and things like that. So I'm not going to put my head out, but I do know that there are places where there has been a significant impact on migratory birds. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of more recent studies suggesting that it's not as bad as people thought. But I'm not going to go out on a limb on that. So again, that's something I'd like to do more research on. But everything you do has some kind of risk. Right, that's inevitable with power generation because you are in the process of literally remaking things to create power. Right, so there's going to be some kind of cost associated with it.
Yeah, for sure. And solar, and that's another concern about.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at solar now, what's the big sort of like risk there? And the answer is we're going to have all of these panels that are 20 years old in 20 years' time that we have to recycle, and we don't have good recycling technology for solar. We have some. Right, we're working on it to improve it, but there's going to be an awful lot of these panels that we're going to have to do something about.
Right, and the environmental footprint to create the panels and to ship the panels and all that goes with it.
Yeah. I mean, shipping is like what happens in a world where to ship something it's 5 times the cost it is now.
Right.
That makes a very, very big change on global trade.
Sure.
Right, and so that's one of the things that a few economists have written about.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, 902-405-6000. We've got Dr. Rob at the top of the hour. It's room for you as well. Give us a buzz if you'd like to chat with Rob. The Science Files, 902-405-6000. Science Files continues when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. Kevin's done just that. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, guys. How are you doing today?
We're well.
Thanks.
Yeah. So my question for Dr. Rob has got to do with the past conversations here the last couple of minutes about nuclear and wind and solar. Sure. Mine concern is in the transmission. Like if you put a nuke plant in, it makes a whole ton of power, but you still got to transport that power.
Sure.
And if you put a wind farm in or a solar farm in, or you take a whole bunch of hydrocarbons and you built big plants, you still got to transport the power.
Yeah.
And copper is not cheap right now, and it's only going to get more expensive as it gets more rare. So they're going to start digging up the ocean bottoms.
Yeah, but we use aluminum for power lines?
Yeah, but in the past they did that. It didn't work very well.
Well, I don't know. There's new aluminum power lines. Honestly, I'm not really speaking completely frankly too worried about it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying about we've got to move the power, that's absolutely right. In fact, so the thing I am worried about is building a grid where we can connect all of these different sources. So with nuclear, people will say, well, we can make sure we put the plant somewhere on the grid and that then we'll be set, which is true. With wind, no. Right, because you've got to go where the wind resources are, right? So that is actually one of the challenges with wind, which is basically having infrastructure in place to be able to move the power. It's not such an issue, I think, with nuclear because you just build it in the most appropriate place, as long as you've got accessible area.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying is the aluminum can be used to build the grid instead of copper.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a new one for me. Anyway, that was it. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care, 902-405-6000. John, hello.
Yes, just want to make a comment on that last caller there on aluminum and what he's talking about is residential houses. Years ago, they brought in aluminum wire for wiring houses, and that turned out to be a disaster. I know.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But on the transmission lines, and even right now, they've gone to 8-3 in houses to use your range and your dryer, and they're using aluminum, and they're not having any issues with it.
Okay.
That's not the reason I call. The main concern I have is with two items. Number one, like take the whole picture of where 4 times in the past several months, our friend to the south, the President of the United States, said that he does not need Canada's energy. Okay, now in Canada, so let's say we play along with that, and in Canada we get the imbalance of the trade going, which instead of exporting our power out of Quebec and what's coming out of Muskrat Falls through a subsea cable because Quebec would not allow it to go through their transmission corridor that we're shipping to the United States, let's feed into the system and do independence in Canada. Never mind these hundreds of $1 million it's going to cost to do offshore wind. Forget about that. We have sufficient hydro coming out of James Bay and out of Muskrat Falls, and we have additional that we can add on to it there. We have Niagara Falls. We have the Bay of Fundy. Let's go to something that's clean, safe, and always there.
So you want the Atlantic Loop?
Yes, but then take we could turn around and change. It would take 5 years of pain till we get to the point where we would have our balance of getting away from exporting our power to the United States, but we'd get that trade imbalance fixed up. That's a big complaint is with that president. So that there in itself. But what bothers me about the solar panels, I drive around and I just shake my head. I've got close to 50 years experience in construction, and I'm looking up at roofs of churches, houses, and commercial buildings, and I'm seeing taxpayers' money going into, contributing to the cost of putting these solar panels in on what? Asphalt shingles now that last half the lifetime of what they were originally designed for, and putting these solar panels on these buildings that they're going to have to change the roof in 10 years, and they're going to have to take all those panels off to do the job properly and then put them back on again. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, no.
So we should not be putting any funding or contribution towards solar on roofs unless they have a metal roof.
Steel roof. Yeah. That's funny. Sorry. I'm laughing because I got a steel roof thinking we might put solar on.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it. I have had my
Okay.
fun.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Miles, hello.
How you doing?
Doing well.
I'd just like to know what's coming out of the back of them jets and airplanes and stuff that's going in that air.
Oh, what you mean the contrails that you can see, like the white thing behind?
No, I'd like to know what kind of gas is coming out of that planes and jets, and you know what I mean.
So I mean, you're basically burning a form of kerosene when you fly a jet. So jet fuel is kerosene derived. I can't tell you the precise formula in terms of the hydrocarbons, but you'll get a limited amount of sort of like unburnt stuff coming out. So there'll be some CO2 emissions, there'll be some carbon emissions as well, right?
How much thing would a plane take? I don't know too much about planes, but how long would it take, say, from Halifax Airport to drive on the other side of the world, fly on the other side of the world nonstop? How many hours would it be?
Oh, well, if you want to fly to Australia, you've got like close to the problem I have is you're going to have to take stops in airports, but that's at least like a 28-hour flight.
Okay. On that flight, how much fuel would that burn from that end of one side to the other? How much kerosene?
I can't do that. I'd have to sit down and do a calculation. I think it's going to be a few tons, probably.
Okay, then you take that up in the air now. That's up there next to on top of the clouds. And then when we're getting rain down here, if you go to the middle of the field anywhere and get a glass of water and you bring it in and you try to drink it, it's the same thing if you cleaned your stove out and put water in it.
Yeah, but it's what you've got to remember, though, is it's very thinly distributed, right? And it's mixed up. That's the main thing. I mean, there aren't planes that are sort of like flying overhead constantly crisscrossing one another and thousands of them at any one time. And there's a few, right? But the atmosphere is fairly big, and so that will dissipate over time.
You get that falling down on the trees and stuff, that's about the same thing as throwing gasoline over after the year, so many years.
So, I mean, I would be more concerned, if you're concerned about rain, right, I would be more concerned about emissions from processing plants and so on that end up contributing to acid rain. Right, that's a more significant problem.
I'd like to know, I'd really like to find out how many gallons of whatever, propane, whatever, take from Halifax to the other side of the world and going over those here places where all them wildfires is. How many, going across that same area.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're getting at. So the long and the short is I don't think we've got a situation where you're literally pouring fuel on the fire, as it were. That's really not happening.
Well, how come then lately that there's more volcanoes than it's got to be feeding it? I mean, that's a volcano is about the same thing as a vacuum cleaner sucking that in.
So my question is, do we know that there are more volcanoes? Right.
Nobody really told me.
So I'm not sure there actually is, right? Being completely honest, right? So someone has done an analysis of this, and it's not clear. What we have happening right now is we have a lot more reporting of volcanoes around the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, then thank you very much. And the reason I would have called you last week, but I couldn't get the number down fast enough to ring it. I didn't know what the first three numbers.
No problem.
Okay, Miles, thanks for the call.
You too.
All right,
Bye
take
now.
care. All right, Rob, before I let you go, one more plug for your event
For the talk
going
tonight,
on?
yeah. So JJ Cavallars, Cosmic Fossils and the Origin of Planets, 7 p.m. at the McNally Theatre Auditorium at St. Mary's. No tickets. If you want to get in, show up early.
First come, first serve.
Yep.
Okay, fair enough. Rob, thanks for doing it. I know you're busy.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, that's Rob Thacker. That's the Science Files, folks. And we do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass of the control boards. Doing a fine job as always. Thanks for listening, everybody. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.